Jeremiah had learned it early on that people saw him, but they didn't really see him. He was just another black man in the world, someone they could easily dismiss. He worked as a janitor at a prestigious law firm in the heart of the city, a place where the white walls gleamed, and the air smelled of expensive leather and overused cologne. Each day, he cleaned up the remnants of power, crumbs from lunch meetings, discarded coffee cups, scattered files. But his own power, his own presence, was invisible. The white executives and attorneys hardly looked at him as they passed by, their eyes skimming over him as if he were a fixture in the background of their shiny, polished world. They couldn't know the truth about him, because he kept it hidden. They wouldn't have understood it if they did. But it wasn't just the executives that treated him this way. It was his boss, Catherine, who thought he was nothing more than a lowly janitor, not capable of anything but mopping the floors and emptying the trash. She would often make comments about his lack of ambition, assuming that his life was defined by the menial task of cleaning up after the important people. "Jeremiah, do you ever think about moving up?" Catherine would say, her tone dripping with condescension as if the thought of him having any kind of future beyond his current position was laughable. "Maybe you should look into something more meaningful. I mean, you could actually have a career here if you just showed a little initiative." Jeremiah would smile, his lips tight, but never respond. He didn't owe her an explanation. No one could understand the weight of his silence, the years of struggle, the pain of being invisible, the way the world seemed to pass him by without a second glance. But the truth was far more complex than Catherine or anyone else could ever imagine. Jeremiah's family had been wealthy once. Very wealthy. His grandfather had been a founding partner of this law firm, his vision and ambition laying the groundwork for what had become a legal powerhouse. The firm was a symbol of success, and his family had been celebrated for their achievements. But history, as it often does, had a cruel way of erasing the contributions of people like them, black people whose wealth and influence weren't allowed to take center stage in the way that their white counterparts' legacies did. After his grandfather's death, his father had taken over the firm, but things began to unravel. There were betrayals, mismanagement, and eventually, a quiet, swift decline that sent the once thriving business into obscurity. As a young man, Jeremiah had witnessed his family lose everything, except for the one thing that his father had fought to preserve, the legacy of their name. His father had made certain arrangements, putting money and assets into secret trusts that he hoped would one day give his son the power to reclaim what was lost. But that day hadn't come yet, not until now. Jeremiah's life had been shaped by the desire to remain anonymous, to stay out of the public eye, to not draw attention to himself. He worked at the firm not out of necessity, but because he knew it would keep him close to the heart of the company, to the very source of his family's legacy. He could feel the pulse of the firm in his veins, and every time he wiped down the mahogany desks or polished the windows, he felt the weight of his family's past pressing down on him. But the time had come for him to step into the light. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. It started as just another ordinary day, Catherine snapping at him for a missed spot on the floor, the usual murmurs of busy attorneys planning their next big case, but then came the phone call. His lawyer, Mr. Allen, had been trying to reach him for days. Jeremiah had ignored the calls at first, thinking it was just another business matter, another reminder of the obligations his father had left behind. But when he finally answered, the voice on the other end was urgent, demanding his attention. "Jeremiah, it's time. Your father's estate, it's all set. The final documents are in order. You need to come to the office, and I'll explain everything." His heart raced as the words settled over him like a weight, and he knew, deep in his bones, that this was the moment he'd been waiting for. He wasn't just the janitor at the law firm anymore. He wasn't just the forgotten son of a once great family. He was about to step into the shoes that had been made for him long ago. When he arrived at Mr. Allen's office, the lawyer wasted no time. He handed Jeremiah a thick, bound folder full of legal documents, bank statements, ownership papers, confidential contracts. And as the words began to sink in, the true scope of the inheritance revealed itself. Not just money, but control of the very firm that had been his family's creation. Jeremiah's grandfather had been more than just a businessman. He'd been a visionary who understood the importance of legacy and power. In secret, he had set up a trust, a set of investments that had grown into a fortune far greater than anything the firm itself had ever acknowledged. Through this trust, Jeremiah was now the majority shareholder, the person with the final say on all major decisions. And Catherine? The boss who'd belittled him for years? She was about to learn the truth. The next morning, Jeremiah walked into the office with a different sense of purpose. His heart beat steady, the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove but everything to gain. He walked past the gleaming glass doors and into the heart of the firm, where the white executives were already gathering for their morning briefing. Catherine looked up from her desk and smiled that thin, fake smile, her eyes flickering over him dismissively. "Well, Jeremiah," she said with a sneer, "did you manage to finish up the cleaning? I have a few things I'd like you to." "Actually, Catherine," Jeremiah interrupted, his voice steady, "I'm the one who'll be giving the orders today." Her face froze, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm the majority shareholder of this firm," Jeremiah said, his words slow but deliberate. "And you're about to find out that everything you've believed about me has been wrong." The room fell silent as Catherine's eyes darted around, her mind struggling to comprehend what he was saying. The others in the room were equally stunned, unsure of how to react. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Catherine's facade began to crack. She stammered, her usual confidence slipping away. But you're just the janitor. You." Jeremiah's gaze hardened. "I've been more than that, Catherine. I've always been more than that." Catherine's face flushed with shock and embarrassment, and her words faltered. The other executives in the room were suddenly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. They'd all assumed Jeremiah was nothing more than the help. A man whose existence in their world was limited to mopping the floors and keeping the office running, a silent fixture in the background of their high-powered lives. But now, as his words sank in, their collective arrogance began to crumble. Catherine, still reeling, managed to stammer, You're the majority shareholder?" Her voice was small now, almost pleading. She had built her career on the assumption that she could rise by stepping over people like Jeremiah, using her white privilege to climb the corporate ladder. But this wasn't the way it was supposed to go. Jeremiah stood tall, his face calm but his heart heavy with all the years of disrespect he'd endured. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to be treated differently, but this company is mine now. My family's legacy is still here. I'm not just a janitor, Catherine. I'm the reason this firm is standing today. My grandfather laid the foundation, and now I'm finishing the work he started." He let the words linger in the air, watching as Catherine's expression twisted from shock to something darker, to something resembling fear. The others in the room were now looking at him differently. They had known him only as a quiet, unassuming man, someone who served them without question. But now, as they watched him, they saw not a janitor, but someone with authority, someone whose power had always been just beneath the surface, waiting to be recognized. Jeremiah turned toward the window, his back to them, and for a moment, he just stared out over the city skyline. The same skyline that had witnessed his family's rise and fall. He took a deep breath before speaking again. "You all thought I was beneath you, didn't you?" His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of sadness. "You thought you could treat me like I didn't belong. That my place in this world was defined by my race, my job, or my lack of a suit and tie. You thought I was invisible." He turned back to face them, his eyes piercing through the room, locking onto each person one by one. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to be in charge. I didn't want to be the one to make decisions about your future. But you gave me no choice. The truth is, I've been watching all of you for years. I've seen the way you treat people like me, the way you walk past me like I don't matter. Well, now I'm the one holding the reins." A long silence followed his words, the weight of his statement hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice small, fragile. "Jeremiah, I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. If I had known." "If you had known," Jeremiah interrupted gently, "you would have treated me the same way you treat everyone else. You would have kept pretending that your success had nothing to do with the people you stepped on to get here." Her face crumpled, guilt washing over her as the realization settled in. She had built her career by leveraging her race and status to secure power, while dismissing those beneath her, including Jeremiah. She had underestimated him at every turn. Now, there was no going back. "I never asked for any of this," Jeremiah continued, his voice softening slightly. "But you have to understand, I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because I want to rebuild what my family started. And I'm doing it to show people like you that no one is invisible. No one should be treated like they don't matter. We all have value, whether you can see it or not. Catherine, for the first time in their years of interaction, looked at him with something akin to respect. It wasn't just the power he held over the firm now, it was the quiet strength and dignity with which he carried himself. She could see that he wasn't the broken man she had assumed him to be. He was a force, something she had underestimated her entire career. The others in the room were equally stunned into silence, some looking at Jeremiah with shame, while others seemed to have had their own biases and misconceptions shattered in that moment. He had taken their assumptions, their insults, and their dismissals, and turned them into a weapon, not for vengeance, but for justice. "Catherine," he said quietly, after a long pause, "you'll stay on for now. But you'll have to earn your place, just like everyone else. I won't tolerate the kind of treatment I've endured here." There was no defiance in his voice, just a quiet certainty, like he knew exactly what needed to be done. For the first time in years, Jeremiah felt like he was in control, not just of the firm, but of his own life. The room slowly came to life again as the shock faded, replaced by the hum of whispered conversations. But Jeremiah wasn't interested in the chatter. His work was just beginning. Months passed, and under Jeremiah's leadership, the firm began to transform. He made decisions that were bold, but fair, and slowly, the firm became a place where merit, not privilege, was the measure of a person's worth. He hired a more diverse team, giving opportunities to people who had been shut out of the legal world for too long. He restructured the company, using the vast wealth he had inherited to reinvest in the community, to offer scholarships, mentorship programs, and legal aid to those who needed it most. And for the first time in his life, Jeremiah felt seen, not just for the power he now wielded, but for the person he truly was. One afternoon, as he walked through the firm's offices, he passed Catherine's desk. She no longer looked at him with the disdain she once had, but with something else, something that could almost be called admiration. They exchanged a brief nod. It wasn't friendship, but it was a recognition of each other's humanity. Jeremiah had taken the burden of his family's legacy and transformed it into something that mattered. He had turned the shame, the disrespect, and the pain into a foundation on which he could build something greater than anything he had ever imagined. A legacy not defined by race or status, but by integrity, by the work he had done to break down the barriers that had once defined him. He had finally come home, not just to the firm, but to himself. If you enjoy this story, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, who knows what story we will uncover next.